It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson, our guru of security, is here with some surprising news. Turns out Meta hasn't been bothering to hash its passwords for some time. PayPal's about to sell your purchase histories. Steve explains how to stop that. And then finally, we're going to explain this whole kerfuffle over Manifest v3, the inability to use uBlock Origin with Chrome, and a little download that will keep you using uBlock Origin at least for another 6 months. All that and a whole lot more coming up next on Security Now.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 995, recorded Tuesday, October 8th, 2024. uBlock Origin and Manifest v3. It's time for Security Now, the show where you get together and talk about your privacy, your security, your well-being online with our well-being professor, Dr. Steve Gibson.
Actually, because we're going to mention vitamin D briefly today, it is a bit of a well-being podcast.
Lisa's doctor said, I want you to do at least 1,000 IUs. I do 5,000 daily. I said, well, just use mine.
That's what you
He said, make sure it's a good provider. But he says, and because she's a menopausal woman, calcium and vitamin D are very important. In fact, for those of us who our skin no longer manufactures vitamin D from the sun, and because we're told don't go in the sun, whatever you do,
or we'll be scraping things off of your skin later in life.
I'm going to the dermatologist at the end of the month. I asked my doctor, I said, do you think this is a problem? He took a picture with an iPhone with a special lens on it. He said, let's get our camera in. And it was an iPhone, but it had a special lens on it. And they took a picture like that and sent it to the dermatologist. Got a call the next day from the nurse. She said, it's not cancer, but we would like to see you. Okay. I think I'll be getting scraped at the end.
Bring your wallet.
Bring your wallet. Steve, what's coming up today on Security Now?
So we've got some follow-up on something we talked about several years ago about Meta having been found not to be bothering to hash their their users' login passwords, which it's just like, what?
In this day and age, really?
It's unbelievable, yes. Also, PayPal is going to begin selling its users' purchase histories unless we turn that off. However, Leo, because you and I are both in California, we don't have to turn it off. Anyway, hallelujah. We'll be talking about that. Yep. There's also 2 other states that don't have to opt out. They are auto opted out. We have meaning bad guys, broken 2021's record for the maximum DDoS size.
Not a good record.
Not a good record. It didn't last very long, but boy, if those wires could melt, this would have melted them. It's also National Cybersecurity Month. When was the last time you updated your router's firmware? North Korean hackers, there's more news about these guys successfully posing as domestic IT workers. Also, we're going to pose and answer the question, why would a security-related podcast ever talk about vitamin D? Also, what's another way the recent Linux cups vulnerability has been found to be weaponizable?
Oh, boy.
What's the secure consumer Wi-Fi router of choice today? That's a listener question that we're going to answer.
I have an answer too, which is what we use, but keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, what should be done to further secure it after its purchase? And recent troubles with Gorhill.
Our good friend Gorhill.
You know, if John Dvorak wrote software, that would be
Raymond
Hill.
A little cranky. Just a little cranky.
Yes. So recent troubles with him. He's uBlock Origin's dad. and specifically its light edition, have shined some light. And I don't know if you would say shone. Is that shone some light? Anyway,
has shone some light.
A light on Chrome's coming content blocking add-on restrictions. It turns out I've discovered a way of postponing the inevitable.
Oh, good.
But at least you get till next summer. We're going to look deeply at what's going on and what can be done.
Oh, good.
And since fully half of the podcast is going to be that rather entertaining discussion, we'll move our ad inserts appropriately.
Well, I'm very interested in this Manifest v3. It feels like Google doesn't want you to run an ad blocker. I wonder why. But, and it would be a reason for me to abandon Chrome, frankly, if I can't run uBlock Origin.
Yep.
I don't want to go out on the web without it. All right. It's going to be a good show. Plus a picture of the week.
It's already had some great feedback. Again, I'll just note to all of our listeners that 10,100 and some odd of our listeners received the show notes, the picture of the week. Yeah, last night.
I'm sitting there watching a movie with Lisa. She said, "Oh, the show notes are here." So apparently Lisa subscribes too.
Yeah, well, Lori has been bugging me for years to start sooner so that I'm less in a froth and a panic.
That's what I told her. I said, "This is the new Steve Gibson."
Yes, this is the married podcaster. So
awesome. Well, we love our wives, and thank goodness they're keeping an eye on us. So our picture of the week coming up in just a bit, plus the bulk of the show. But before we get started, Steve, I'd love to mention our sponsor for this segment is Security Now, and a company you know well. Both of us switched to Bitwarden not so long ago, the open source password manager, which offers a cost-effective, in many cases free solution that can dramatically improve your chances of staying safe online. That's more important than ever right now. We're in the middle of Prime Days, Cyber Monday's coming up, Black Friday, a lot of holiday shopping. And this is when the bad guys come out in force trying to spoof you, trying to get you to enter your credit card information, your contact information, your passwords in what looks like real websites, but they're not. They're phishing sites. They're spoofing you. This is where Bitwarden is so wonderful. In fact, they've just announced the expansion of this inline autofill that they do, where they automatically fill in your password, of course. But now they have cards, credit cards in there, identities, addresses, so forth, even pass keys. And by expanding this capability, they're protecting you because the autofill will only work if you're on the actual site, not a phishing site, not a spoofed site. So this is huge. This is why. Now, look, I know if you listen to Security Now, you're probably already using Bitwarden. You're certainly using a password manager. But I tell people this who watch this show all the time. Your friends and family probably aren't, right? This is something we all suffer with, where you're over at your aunt's house or your sister's house or your brother's house, and they say, "Oh, yeah, I don't need a password manager. I remember my password perfectly. It's my dog's name, my mother's maiden name, and my zip code." And you go, you use that yes. No, don't worry. I'd add one to it every once in a while just to throw the bad guys off. No, you need a password manager. And then they say, "Oh, I don't want a password manager. It's too complicated, too hard to use, too expensive." Let me tell you something. Bitwarden is awesome, whether it's at home or at work. In fact, for an individual user, it's free for life because it's open source. It's free forever. Unlimited passwords. Unlimited platforms, iOS, Android, Mac, Linux, Windows, everywhere. Pass keys, hardware keys like the YubiKey, all for free forever because it's open source. But it's also great for business. For instance, does your business use SSO? You get unparalleled SSO integration and flexibility with Bitwarden. You can quickly and easily safeguard all your business logins using your single sign-on security policies, your policies. Bitwarden's fully compatible with SAML 2 and OIDC, and Bitwarden makes the integration super smooth with your existing solution, so you don't have to change anything. It's fantastic. Thousands of businesses, including some of the world's largest organizations, trust Bitwarden to protect their online information. Because Bitwarden is open source, that code can be inspected by anyone and is regularly audited by third-party experts. I think that's why anything with crypto should be open source, because you want to make sure there's no backdoors, there's no errors, that they're doing it right, and Bitwarden does it right. Switching to Bitwarden is easy. It just takes a couple of minutes. They support importing from most password management solutions. And if it's Uncle Joe, they will help him change all of those lousy passwords he's been using for years with long, strong, unmemorable passwords that he only uses once per site. It makes it very easy. So what are you waiting for? Get started with Bitwarden's free trial of a Teams or Enterprise plan for your business. Or, as I said, get started for free across all devices as an individual user at bitwarden.com/twit. Bitwarden does everything I want for free. I pay $10 a year to be a premium user just because I want to support them. This is an open source project you will want to support and you'll want to use. Bitwarden.com/twit. And please tell Uncle Joe. Bitwarden.com/twit. It's free, Joe. It's free. .com/twit. And please tell Uncle Joe. Bitwarden.com/twit. It's free, Joe. It's free. All right, I'm ready, Steve. Picture of the week time.
We didn't talk about this before, and I assume you have not yet seen it.
I have just seen the headline, Modern Product Packaging Can Be a Challenge.
Yes.
All right. So, Okay.
Now,
together, we'll look at this together. I'm sorry. It's hard not to laugh here. Wait a minute. Let me make it big.
You're supposed to laugh. That's the whole point.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have a pair of scissors.
Yeah.
And you have those horrible blister pack.
Oh, my
packages.
God. And, I'm surprised there's not blood on the table somewhere.
I know. They're just awful.
Yes. So for those who don't have the advantage of seeing the picture of the week from the show notes, this shows that some hapless individual used a pair of scissors to open their Logitech corded mouse.
Oh.
Unfortunately, where they chose to cut across the package with their scissors, cut the mouse's tail. That is its cord. A number of people have replied and said, well, that's one way to get a cordless mouse.
Not the right way.
And not the right way. No. Anyway, it's just a great picture because
it's probably from a real person because who hasn't done this, right? This is just
actually several people wrote and said, yeah, I've done something like that.
Yep.
It's like they really are awful. Sometimes they like they will hide the instructions for using the thing inside. So when you cut across it, you're like cutting the instruction manual in half. I mean, it's just it's very convenient for high volume packaging, but all of the burden is transferred to the user who, as we said, you have to what I do is I carefully cut around the perimeter, yet then you got to watch out that you don't get stabbed by the sharp edge of the packaging that has been cut by the scissors. It's just bad. So anyway, thank you. One of our listeners sent this to me. All the pictures of the week are listener sourced. So I very much appreciate them.
We're going to fix this lower third, Benito. It says Wednesday, and it is not Wednesday. So if anybody's watching and saying, oh my God, it's Wednesday. No, it's not.
But it is the 8th. So
it is
that's
the
good.
8th. Yes.
Okay. So Ars Technica carried the news that officials in Ireland have fined Meta $101 million for their storing of hundreds of millions of user passwords in plain text rather than hashing them, which, of course, as we know, provides both breach and internal employee abuse protection. Ars first reported this conduct, and we talked about it 5 years ago, back in 2019. And at the time, Ars used the headline, Facebook apps logged users' passwords in plain text because why not? With the subhead, unencrypted user credentials stored on Facebook's internal servers as far back as 2012. And, this sort of shows a problem in general with that we see occurring in all different sorts of places, because our technology, the way technology has been implemented, is opaque. And, it's true everywhere, right? Like, we don't know the plastic that our seat cushions are made of and whether it's outgassing carcinogens. We just hope that they aren't. But, how do you know? And we have no idea who is responsibly storing our credentials. We only find out that they haven't been when a breach occurs and all the passwords are in plain text and not hashed. Anyway, back in 2019, when we talked about this, Facebook said, Facebook has mined a lot of data. I'm sorry, not Facebook. Ours reporting said, Facebook has mined a lot of data about its users over the years, relationships, political leanings, and even phone call logs. And it now appears Facebook, and this is in 2019, they're writing, Facebook may have inadvertently extracted another bit of critical information, users' login credentials, stored unencrypted, meaning unhashed, on Facebook servers and accessible to Facebook employees. Brian Krebs reports that hundreds of millions of Facebook users had their credentials logged in plain text by various applications written by Facebook employees. Those credentials were searched, and here's the point that the numbers are just staggering. Those credentials, right? The Facebook users' app login credentials stored in plain text, Krebs reported at the time, were searched by about 2,000 Facebook engineers and developers more than 9 million times, according to a senior Facebook employee who spoke to Krebs. The employee asked to remain anonymous because they did not have permission to speak to the press on the matter. No, I would not think they would have permission. And of course, I recall this from when we talked about it 5 years ago because those numbers are so outrageous. So now ours is reporting 5 years downstream currently that Facebook has spent these past 5 years, quote, investigating this. What? 5 years? Heading into ours reporting, they now said Meta investigated for 5 years. But as I said, this seems to me the term investigated should be put in air quotes because it's difficult to see how an investigation of non-hashing of login credentials could possibly require anybody 5 years. Also, apparently they've got 2,000 engineers who have time to search through their own customers' passwords. You'd think they'd have some time to do some investigating of how they're like, why aren't they hashing anything? How could this take 5 years is beyond me. And if anything, over that course of time, whatever trail there was would have only grown more stale year after year as people who knew the details became less accessible and probably more forgetful, whether conveniently or not. So this feels a lot like Facebook dragging their feet internally and not wanting to give any final result from their investigation. But in any event, now ours reports that Graham Doyle, Ireland's Deputy Commissioner of Data Protection, says, quote, "It is widely accepted that user passwords should not be stored in plain text, considering the risks of abuse that arise from persons accessing such data. It must be borne in mind that the passwords, the subject of consideration in this case, are particularly sensitive, as they would enable access to users' social media accounts." And of course, the other thing we know, unfortunately, is that anybody who is still not using a password manager and while the percentage of internet users who today are using password managers has been going up significantly, still it's a minority. And we know then that there's a high incidence of password reuse. So passwords stored in plain text can be used as a starting point for guessing the reuse of those credentials elsewhere. Anyway, Ireland has been investigating the incident since Meta disclosed it, and their Commission of Data Protection, which is the lead European Union regulator for most U.S. internet services, finally imposed a fine of $101 million. That's 91 million euros this past week. So we can add that to the pile of fines that Facebook has incurred since the EU has been levying fines. Now, I have to say, $101 million is not much compared to the more than $2.23 billion, that's 2 billion euros, for violations of the General Data Protection Regulation, the famous or infamous GDPR, which went into effect in 2018. So, that amount includes last year's record $1.34 billion, which is 1.2 billion euro fine, which Meta is now appealing. So I presume, though I haven't looked into it since it's not frankly that interesting, that these fines, and we talked about them at the time, are due to Facebook storing EU citizen data outside the EU, likely in US-based data centers. In any event, this is all a mess and demonstrates that, as an industry, we're still trying to figure out how to do all this stuff so that everybody is happy, and we're not there yet. Okay, now we have an action item for a lot of our listeners. A new forthcoming PayPal default will be opting all of their customers, their users, into merchant data sharing. 2 weeks ago, PayPal posted a 60-day notice warning of a forthcoming change to their privacy statement, which will become effective at the end of November, on November 27th. The amendment says, under notices/issued dated September 23rd, 2024, amendments to the PayPal privacy statement becoming effective November 27th. And PayPal clearly explained, we are updating our privacy statement to explain how, starting early summer of 2025, so not till next summer, we will share information to help improve your shopping experience and make it more personalized for you. The key update to the privacy statement explains how we will share information with merchants to personalize your shopping experience and recommend our services to you. Personal information we disclose includes, for example, products, preferences, sizes, and styles we think you'll like. Information gathered about you after the effective date of our updated privacy statement, November 27, 2024, will be shared with participating stores where you shop, unless you live in California, North Dakota, or Vermont. For PayPal customers in California, North Dakota, or Vermont, we'll only share your information with those merchants if you tell us to do so. No matter where you live, you'll always be able to exercise your right to opt out of this data sharing by updating your preference settings in your account under Data and Privacy. We're also making other updates to our privacy statement, including some additional disclosures related to your right, depending on the jurisdiction in which you reside, to ask us for a list of the third parties to which we've disclosed personal information and to provide other clarifying information. Okay, now, TechRadar carried the news of this by writing, another week, another online service silently changing its data collection and sharing practices by default. Now, I will argue, and I'll talk about this in a minute, that PayPal is in a different category, but okay. They said, TechRadar said, that the good news is that you still have time to opt out before any of your information gets automatically given away without your consent, which is completely true. As per PayPal's policy update page issued on September 23rd for U.S. users, the service is set to exchange your data with third-party merchants to, quote, help improve your shopping experience and make it more personalized for you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Another way for PayPal to generate revenue, we understand. TechRadar said, starting in early summer 2025, the new policy will not just come at the detriment of your privacy, even if you're using the best VPN apps, but PayPal will start gathering data as early as November 27th, 2024, which is interesting. So they're going to start, they're officially going to start accruing all of the things that their purchasers, their users do, the purchase through PayPal. So I guess so that there's a nice chunk of it available to offer when they officially start releasing it and obviously selling it this coming summer.
Do other credit card companies do this? I mean,
No. They and credit card companies don't have access the way PayPal has with the merchant sites where they're present. You know, I use a credit card company, just their back end merchant services, and all they get from me is the minimum amount of information required to transact the credit card purchase. Nothing, no other information. But PayPal has an information sharing agreement with their merchants as part of all of this. Anyway, TechRadar said users appear to be opted in by default, which may be an issue under some privacy regulations like GDPR. After coming across some U.S.-based accounts complaining about this on Twitter, we decided to check, writes TechRadar, if that was the case also for people in the UK. When we accessed privacy settings, the option was automatically toggled on. It's also important to bear in mind that the policy changes will not apply in the same ways across all jurisdictions and users. For instance, in the UK, the new data sharing is set to be enforced on October 10th, 2024, which, in 2 days.
That's day after tomorrow. Oh, yeah. Wow.
A policy update dated July 8th clarifies that for the UK market, quote, merchants are permitted to share customer personal information provided to them by PayPal with their service providers. We suggest checking your profile settings as soon as possible to reverse the change if you don't wish your data to be shared. Okay, now I had to read that last part twice. In the UK, PayPal will be sharing its users' shopping histories with merchants, and in turn, those merchants will be permitted to share this personal information provided by PayPal with the customer's service providers. So UK-based ISPs who are not PayPal merchants will nevertheless obtain this information indirectly through the merchants who are.
Oh, this is disgusting.
This
is terrible.
It's unbelievable. And note that all of these information sharing activities are pretty much guaranteed to be for pay arrangements, right? PayPal is unlikely to be sharing this valuable information with their merchants for free. Or if it is for free, then it represents an additional inducement for a merchant to offer PayPal payment. The pitch would be offer PayPal checkout, and as an added benefit, we'll provide you with the detailed buying histories of the people who come to your website.
Aye.
So, as it happens, the people who participate in discussions over in GRC's think tank news group know, because I was discussing the pros and cons of it there, that I had recently been considering reducing software purchase friction by adding PayPal checkout to GRC's e-commerce system.
Yeah, a lot of Europeans prefer it.
Yes. I decided not to, in the interest of remaining with a single universal credit card solution, since I've been using that for the past 25 years. Learning of this, I'm certain that I made the right decision, since I would feel uncomfortable using a payment solution that defaults to profiling its users' purchasing. Since, I mean, that's deeply confidential information. And now I have to say, I use PayPal myself, but fortunately, I'm in California. And while the nanny state nature of California does occasionally annoy me and interfere with my choices, in this case, I was glad to find that indeed, that information sharing switch that almost everyone else will find is on by default was off for me. For anyone who uses PayPal, after logging in, go to Settings, which is a gear icon in the upper right if you're using a web browser. Under Data and Privacy, you'll find the section Manage Shared Info. And within that section, you'll see Personalized Shopping. If you select that option, you'll be presented with some description and a big switch. And it says, let us share products, offers, and rewards you might like with participating stores. And then it says, and then there's a big switch. Mine was off because I'm in California. Other people will find theirs on. So it says, starting early summer 2025, we'll be building more personal experiences for you. You can opt in and out of sharing at any time by adjusting this setting. And then there's a link, how personalized shopping works. If you click that, I have all this pictures of all this in the show notes. It says how personalized shopping works. We're on a mission to help you find the most relevant products and styles. And it says, we'll share recommendations with participating stores based on your shopping history and preferences. Your info helps participating stores show you products, offers, and rewards you might like. So yes, yet another privacy invasion. This is a new section, an option that no PayPal user will have seen before. TechRadar explained that in the U.S., only residents of California, North Dakota, and Vermont will find this turned off by default, with it being on for everyone else, including those in the United Kingdom. Underneath that big switch, I explained what it says. And so, I know how this audience, the audience of this podcast, feels about internet privacy, since I've long enjoyed plenty of two-way communication with our listeners, first through Twitter, now through email. So I wanted to be sure that everyone using PayPal in the United Kingdom, probably elsewhere in the world and in the U.S., who does not reside in those three states, knew about PayPal's user purchase data sharing plans in time to preemptively say, gee, thanks, but no thanks. So flipping that off anytime before the end of November will prevent PayPal from ever starting to do this. So having said all that, I do also want to acknowledge that both this past Sunday, 2 days ago, and also the Sunday before, PayPal did very clearly notify me through email of these pending changes in a completely above-board fashion. In the identical email that I received on those successive Sundays, they wrote, our updated privacy statement outlines how we'll use info collected about you after November 27, 2024 to inform participating stores about what products, offers, and rewards you might like. So, while we know that the tyranny of the default will work in their favor, and that defaulting to opt in, we'll see most people simply glaze over, delete that email without pursuing it because, we're constantly getting updates about this or that, privacy statement being amended. In fact, during my walk yesterday evening with Lori, I mentioned this to her, and she just said, yeah, I don't ever read those. I said, yeah, no one does.
Right.
So,
yeah, but that's why, you read your email. Most people go, oh, it's just more solicitations. I don't need it.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, this, to me, this feels extra troublesome because this is a service that I have used simply because I prefer not spreading my credit card number and information around. It's why I was considering, adopting it for GRC, because I recognize, how I see how glad I am when some random merchant I'm going to allows me to pay through PayPal, because it is the lower friction transaction. Unfortunately, PayPal realized, wow, look at all this information that we're getting about the people who use our service. We could be making some extra money by selling that. And so, unless we say no thank you, that's what they're going to begin doing. Well, I know our listeners want to know. And Leo,
you should see all the comments in YouTube. Paul Reed, I turned it off. Thanks, Steve. John Regan, I just turned mine off too. Let's see. Vegeta, I received the email today, but skipped it until your story. People, thank you, Steve, is I guess the general sentiment. Because, who reads those emails?
Yep.
Do you want to take a break? Is that what I sense from you?
Yes.
A little. Yeah, I would like to take a break right now. Well, good news, Steve, because we have sponsors, and they want to tell you about their product, okay? And by the way, I just want to tell you, we're not like PayPal. We know nothing about you. We can't know anything about you. This is an RSS feed that goes to an IP address that we don't know who it is. So don't worry about it. We're not ever we couldn't collect that kind of information unless you join the club. And then we don't need to because you're giving us $7 a month, right? Our sponsors, the reason our sponsors are here is not because we're giving them information about you, but this is the old-fashioned way. They figure you're listening to security now, you'll probably be interested in our product. That just makes sense, right? Like Melissa, the data quality experts since 1985. We've been doing this show a long time, but they've been doing that even longer. Whether you need the full white glove service or just the nuts and bolts, Melissa is the best way to keep your data up to date for your enterprise. Melissa's helped over 10,000 businesses worldwide harness accurate data with their industry-leading solutions. In fact, they've processed over 1 trillion with a T addresses, emails, names, phone records. And it's easy to use because Melissa offers integrations and apps in the platforms you're already using, the spreadsheet editors like Microsoft 365, Google Sheets. Do you use Dynamics 365? You can have Melissa just integrate right into it. Esri, Stripe, Shopify, all of this makes it really easy. And it's important to do this because you don't want to send products to the wrong address. You don't want to call a person by the wrong name. And it's really easy to access, and you want to get it at right there at the data entry level, whether it's your customer service rep or your customer herself. You want to make sure that your data is clean, is standardized, and you can do it with the popular platforms you're already using. That helps improve ROI. It improves your business efficiency. And your customers love it because they don't like to be called Mr. when they're Miss, right? Elevate the customer experience. Be sure to check out Melissa's marketplace too. They've got a whole marketplace, on-demand access to premium third-party data, which you can use to improve campaign performance, enhance data visualization, drive better business decisions. Some of the things you can choose from: consumer, property owner, and business contact data by industry, location, job title, 400 other attributes. There's a global address database. Of course, there's a U.S. database, a master list of 200 plus million verified USPS addresses, coverage for more than 40 countries. They've got USPS carrier, route and boundaries, zip code data, parcel boundaries, location data for the US and Canada. I can go on and on. The marketplace is big. So you can have the data, additional data that you need so you can better serve your customer. This is good too. You know exactly how much it's going to cost because Melissa offers transparent pricing for all its services. You don't have to guess when you're estimating your business budget. And because you listen to Security Now, I know you're very aware of the whole idea of data security, privacy. Melissa's services use secure encryption for all file transfers and an information security ecosystem built on the ISO 27001 framework. They adhere to GDPR policies. They maintain SOC 2 compliance. They know this data is valuable, and they make sure they keep it safe. Look, this is a great company. They've been doing it for a long time, and they can even get you started with 1,000 records cleaned for free right now at melissa.com/twit. MELISSA, melissa.com/twit. We thank them so much for their support of Security Now. We thank you for supporting us by using that address and going there, and that way they know you saw it on Steve's show. Now let's hear about that DDoS record. What was the old record?
Oh, baby. Last Friday, Cloudflare disclosed that it had broken yet another record in fending off the largest DDoS attack ever seen on the internet. Though the attack was brief, it lasted only 65 seconds from start to finish. During those 65 seconds, Cloudflare's infrastructure was hit by an attack that peaked at 3.8 terabits per second.
Whoa.
3.8 trillion bits per second. So,
don't be reassured by the briefness of this. That just means they were testing it, right?
Yes.
They test the weapon before they point it at somebody.
Yes, and what was interesting to me, because I saw the graph of this, was how steep the leading and trailing edges were. I've seen a lot of DDoS attacks myself, and generally they sort of ramp up to full steam, and then they sort of fade out over time, because, as the different agents get the news of where they should be attacking. This attack had a really surprisingly sharp edges. It came on, went like right at a full strength, 3.8 terabits per second. It went for 65 seconds, and then it just shut itself down. So to me, that was really interesting. Maybe there's a new way these are being staged, where, for example, the instructions go out to, at this time, launch an attack at this target. Yes, now you've got it on screen, and
Look at that.
That is
that's an on-off switch. That's incredible.
It's really interesting. Yeah, look at that.
Wow.
2.1 billion packets per second.
Now they're coming from commandeered machines, from routers. It's not just from one guy's machine, obviously.
That's also interesting here. I'm definitely, that's not one guy at all.
Yeah.
Because you can't, so the way Cloudflare, the only way Cloudflare is able to fend these off, and it literally, the target of the attack was not affected by this, which is astonishing.
Mind-boggling.
You have to think in terms of Cloudflare's ability to absorb the attack. They're absorbing it so that none of their conduits are saturated by that packet rate or that bit rate, so that valid traffic to the target of the attack is still able to get through Cloudflare's infrastructure and reach the servers that it's protecting.
It's a heck of an ad for Cloudflare.
And in fact, I was going to share their disclosure of this, but it was marketing speak. It was them bragging. It's like,
it's an ad. Yeah.
You do. I'm not saying you don't deserve to brag, but I'm not going to read your advertisement. So, in the last month, Cloudflare which is no stranger to DDoS attacks because it's one of the services they offer, has fended off over 100 of these so-called hypervolumetric layer 3 and 4 DDoS attacks, many of which exceeded 2 billion packets per second. These so-called hypervolumetric layer 3 and 4 DDoS attacks have been occurring since the start of September, and their targets have generally been customers in the financial services, the internet, and the telecommunications industries who are hiding their servers behind Cloudflare specifically in order to remain on the air despite what would otherwise be wire melting attack levels. This recent record-breaking 3.8 terabits per second attack broke the previous record, which had been set nearly 3 years ago in November of 2021. That attack peaked at 3.47 terabits per second, this one being at 3.8. So, we're sort of reaching, you sort of feel like there's a ceiling maybe that we're beginning to hit. And that one, that November 2021 attack was blasting an unnamed Asian-based Microsoft Azure customer, trying to blast them off the net. The attacks are using UDP packets aimed at a fixed port. And though there wasn't any reporting about this, it turns out that DNS reflection attacks are like what a lot of these DDoS services are using. The problem is, and that is to say, UDP packets bouncing off of DNS servers. The reason is DNS servers are one of the most prevalent servers that need to be publicly accessible in order for their services to be offered. So they're out there. So the floods were originating from Vietnam, Russia, Brazil, Spain, and the U.S. Cloudflare said that the high bitrate attacks likely originate from a large botnet comprising infected ASUS home routers that have been exploited using a recently disclosed critical flaw, which is CVE 2024-3080. And that's got a CVSS of 9.8.
Ouch.
Which, that's up there. According to statistics shared by Census, that's CENSYS, which is it's a new internet vulnerability apprising service. It's like Shodan. Their IPs have reverse DNS that points to their domain. And I'm seeing GRC's network being probed by Census all the time. That's how I know it's Census, is that they're, their probes identify them.
And they're looking for the vulnerability. They're
yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. In the same way that the probes that my own Shields Up port scanner sends out, they have reverse DNS set to shieldsup.grc.com, so people who care know that it's a benign, half open TCP probe, that it doesn't actually connect to anything. Anyway, Census said of this 9.8 ASUS flaw, a little over 157,000 ASUS router models were potentially affected by the vulnerability when they did their scan in June 21st of this year, of 2024. And with the majority of those devices located in the US, Hong Kong, and China. So DDoS isn't going away. It's not going to go away. It is we've spent a lot of time over the years talking about DDoS attacks, why they happen and why they are unblockable. For a long time, I was in the early days, I was lobbying for ISPs to filter the packets leaving their networks, egress filtering as it's called, because we had bots that were spoofing their source IPs in order to cause packets to to bounce off of some server and go to the target. And I said, hey, this problem can all be solved if ISPs just won't let these bogus packets that should never originate from within their networks leave their network. Well, that was then. What's happened is now we have these layer 3 and 4 attacks, which are very often HTTP queries. So they're not spoofing their IP, because if you've got hundreds of thousands
it's
of
a million
bots,
ASUS routers.
Yeah.
Hey, it's me. What are you talking about?
Doesn't matter.
Right.
So now the packets leaving are valid, and they're like making very expensive queries of servers that are heavily script laden and take a long time to respond. And it's a server CPU exhaustion where they just can't generate that many high cost pages.
Now, you mentioned the abrupt on and off profile of this attack.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because that means you've got a command and control server that can trigger all of these routers instantly.
Yeah. And that's why I'm thinking maybe they are time synced, and the command is on at this
3 p.m. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Your site was down briefly this week. I was wondering if you were hit by DDoS, or it was just...
It was Sunday morning. It started a little after, like about 9:15, and lasted for an hour, and it was a flood attack. And I was working on the podcast, and so I said, Lori, GRC's down, and she said, oh no, what are you going to do? I said, well, I've got Google Docs open. I'm working on Tuesday's podcast.
Nothing.
So
the answer is nothing. Steve does not negotiate with terrorists, just so you know.
Well, and it takes like
it's not worth it.
Nothing to knock me off the net. I'm not protected. I'm not hiding. I don't have.
Have you thought of becoming a Cloudflare customer?
No.
You're not mission critical. It's not.
Well, and I'm offering a lot of services for free. And if I start doing things that cost me money, then the whole trade-off between what I can choose to do and what doesn't make sense begins to change. Right. So
we do have our servers are behind. I'm not going to be specific about what we do, but we are behind DDoS protection. Of course, that's one of the things Club TWiT pays for. We do have some revenue, and so we're able to do that. Does Cloudflare not offer some sort of free tier? I believe they do. But I don't know if it includes DDoS.
So the other thing is that my bandwidth is complex, because I'm sending out shields up packets. I'm using DNS in order to do version checking for all of the freeware that's able to check for different versions. And it just makes life more complicated. I believe in keeping it simple when I can. And it's we're mostly on the net, and when we're not,
it's not mission critical. That's what I tell my staff. They say, why don't you have generators? Because we're not mission critical. If we're down for an hour or two, no one's going to die. Although, since we closed the studio, I no longer have anywhere to put my server. It used to be running in the studio. So my website, leo.fm, has been down, as have been the Minecraft servers. And I think what I'm going to do is use Cloudflare Pages to host my website, because then you get all those benefits. It's completely free. You get all those benefits. It's a little tricky to set it up. I've been trying for 3 months to do it, but as soon as I figure it out, I will do it. Cloudflare is pretty impressive service, I have to say. I like
them, and I think Microsoft has a service. Akamai has a service.
Amazon does. There are a lot of companies that do this. Yeah. They have to have a lot of bandwidth, right?
So what they have to have is geographic spread.
Yes.
Because the idea is that there are these bots scattered all over the world, which means they're entering Cloudflare's infrastructure at access points all over the world.
Right.
So even though the total amount of bandwidth is high, the local amount of bandwidth is lower than Cloudflare's bandwidth at that location. And that's the key, is that so Cloudflare is so spread geographically that even though the total attack is huge, there's no saturation, no point of saturation. Cloudflare's technology allows them to identify and block the attack at all of the different points across its infrastructure before the routing concentrates the attack down to the server where it's being targeted.
Perfect.
And that's
why it's often CDNs that do this.
Key to them. Yes, exactly. You need a big content delivery network style protection, and I've got a wire. I've got a 100 base T connection. So you
GRC isn't it in 30 countries all over the globe and every continent? No, I don't understand why not.
Okay, so speaking of these ASUS routers, I use an ASUS router for Wi-Fi service at my place with Lori. And even if that router were not safely perched behind a separate pfSense firewall appliance, which connects it to the internet, the last thing I would ever do would be to open a publicly accessible remote admin portal or media server or file server or any of that nonsense, which consumer routers now offer as, bullet points for themselves.
And a lot of people do it. They put their Plex server on the network or whatever.
Yeah, like some poor clown at LastPass. Yeah. So I'm sure that listeners of this podcast have similarly protected themselves, but the census survey reveals that around 157,000 other ASUS owners may not have been so circumspect. So seeing this story, I checked in with my router, which I hadn't for a while. I don't have automatic updates enabled, although the ASUS allows it, since my network has other security provisions, like galore. But it turned out that when I checked, my router's firmware was a bit behind. It was running version 3.004 and 3.006 was available.
Well, that's not too behind. That's just.
I have no trouble with the router, but updating always makes sense. Mm-hmm. And also having layers of security is always a good thing. So the more, the merrier. Since this month of October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, let me take this occasion to suggest that everyone listening just take a moment to check their router's firmware to see whether there's an update available beyond what's running now. I'm glad I did. And I would recommend that everybody turn on automatic firmware updating, since that's a feature that is now available in consumer routers, and it just makes sense.
Should only have it off if you're Steve Gibson and you know what you're doing. I mean,
I would, or, if you're essentially, if you're willing to take responsibility for it being off and you know what that means, and the idea of having your router updating itself for some reason makes you queasy, and I don't think it should.
Yeah.
So we've recently been looking at the growing problem of spoofed identities by remote workers. The news this past week is that more than a dozen blockchain companies have inadvertently hired undercover North Korean IT workers. Because that's what you want in your cryptocurrency company. Wow. We wonder, what is the problem with these blockchain companies? Why can't they get their security right? Well, according to a CoinDesk investigation, these companies include well-established blockchain projects such as Injective, ZeroLend, Phantom, SushiSwap, Yearn Finance, and Cosmos Hub.
Well-established brand names in the crypto space.
All happily employing North Korean IT workers.
Wow.
In every case, the workers passed checks using fake IDs and fake job histories. And, aside from it being an obviously bad idea for any cryptocurrency company to allow an agent of a foreign government inside your sensitive organization, it also happens to be completely against the law in the U.S. and any other companies that have North Korea under sanctions, which include you can't hire anybody who's from North Korea. Wow. I guess that's a consequence of everything going virtual. Unfortunately, you got virtual employees now, and Korean may be their first language.
Yikes. By the way, I wanted to mention this. I know you're very interested in Bitcoin. We covered it. You had some and so forth. And there's always been a question about the person who invented it. You did a couple of really good pieces on
Satoshi,
on the mathematician or group involved behind it, Satoshi Nakamoto. No one knows who that is or if he's or they are still alive. But I'm very curious. Tonight there will be a documentary coming out on HBO by the same guy who kind of blew the lid off Q. Remember the whole Q thing? Colin Hoback is purporting that he knows who Satoshi is, and he will reveal it in this documentary on HBO tonight. So I'm very curious what that's going to be, and I guess that's where I'll be tonight watching that show.
We made some millionaires.
Yeah, and you know, lately with the news of this, some of the very earliest Bitcoin wallets have been opened and transferred out. And so there is some thinking that maybe he did, you know, come upon the true, I mean, so many people have done this, including Newsweek announced incorrectly who Satoshi Nakamoto was. It could just be another one of those. It could be an Al Capone safe, or it could be really a big story.
Wasn't there some guy they outed and he kept saying over and over, I'm not him. Please, I'm not him.
There was some poor Japanese guy named Satoshi. Newsweek put it on the cover. It was not a good. They never. I don't think they ever retracted it. Even it was just terrible. Anyway, I'll let you know next week what I think. It's
cool. Well, I'll make a point of watching it.
It might be worth watching. Yeah.
Yeah.
This guy he absolutely figured out who Q was. So and it was a really good documentary. This one's called Money Electric: The Bitcoin Mystery.
Nice. Mm-hmm. So Chris said, "Hi, Steve. I'm a longtime listener to Security Now, but last week I was hiking in the White Mountains. As I was hiking in the White Mountains," he said, "it occurred to me that there's one episode of this podcast that literally changed my life. And that was the vitamin D episode."
Wow. Me too, I think. Yeah.
And actually, many of our listeners have said the same. He said, 10 years ago, I would listen to podcasts while lying in bed suffering from debilitating back pain. My doctor had prescribed a big bottle of opioids, and I was desperate for an alternative. Good. Yeah. When I heard you and Leo mention vitamin D and your past episode, I went back to the archive and listened to the vitamin D episode, then went to my doctor and made him test me. My vitamin D level was extremely low. I started taking 4,000 IU daily, and over the course of a year, I threw out the pain meds and started to feel much better. I would likely be bedridden and addicted to painkillers rather than hiking in New Hampshire had I not started taking vitamin D. I think it's been a couple of years since I heard you mention vitamin D on the podcast, so I want to urge you to remind people about that episode and your vitamin D page in case there's anyone else out there facing a similar situation.
And this would be the place where Chris. I would mention that neither Steve nor I are medical doctors, and that we, you know, this is not medical advice.
Yes, I have in the show notes. I said everyone should keep in mind that I have no formal medical training of any kind. I'm a self-taught health hobbyist.
Which should say something right there. And Chris's story, while amazing, is purely anecdotal.
Absolutely.
However, the good news is vitamin D is not toxic. So at worst, you're throwing money away, right?
It is toxic at extremely high doses.
You have to take a lot of it.
You have to take a lot.
Yeah.
So it was our audio podcast, actually it was an audio only podcast, Leo, 209, recorded on August 13th of 2009. Yeah. And at the time, I had been spending a lot of time researching health and nutrition. I would take something, a vitamin or a mineral, and read one or more entire books about it, cover to cover. And I have to say that research, which was done 20 years ago before I turned 50, it's had a profound effect upon the lives of myself, my family, and my friends. I have no way of knowing whether I would feel as fantastic as I do today if I had not been consuming a wide range of supplemental nutrition for the past 20 years. We'll never know. But I do know that there's still a lot more that I want to accomplish. So I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing, since if nothing else, it certainly doesn't appear to be hurting. However, I know that for many people, consuming lots of supplements may not be practical for a number of reasons. Many dislike taking pills. They can upset stomachs, and there's an added cost, of course, above one's normal diet. And for that reason, I've been extremely selective, like down to one, about...
I keep begging Steve to tell me what else he knows, but he won't tell me.
So, I've been selective about what I shared of my research.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some fascinating things. But anyway, I felt compelled to steal an early episode of Security Now to explain what I'd learned about vitamin D. What you will find, our listeners who don't already know, will find in that podcast is an explanation of the science and the biochemistry of vitamin D, why it's not actually a vitamin, and the many reasons why it's so crucial to human health. Interestingly, this was done in August of 2009. The spring following that podcast, so the spring of 2010, I started receiving notes from many of our listeners who, separately, individually reported that for the first time in their lives, they and their family, who had started taking a useful amount of vitamin D, had sailed through the winter months without so much as a sniffle. And years later, we saw an example of vitamin D's powerful benefits for our immune system during the world's struggle with COVID-19. Multiple studies revealed, and again, we know that correlation is not causation, but there was a strong correlation shown between people's vitamin D status and their COVID outcomes. So anyway, the reason I chose to talk about vitamin D is that only micrograms of it are required. It's extremely potent. So that means that a useful daily dose of 4,000 to 5,000 IU is delivered in a little tiny, easy to swallow capsule of olive oil, or as I like to refer to them, little drops of sunshine. And vitamin D is also very inexpensive. About a year's supply is $15. So anyway, I just thank you, Chris, for putting this back on everyone's map. Again, I'll say I have no formal medical training. I'm just curious about the way my body works, and I feel a little guilty that there's so much more I could share, but I am self-conscious.
Can we have a little private chat sometime, and you can tell me what else I should be doing?
Well, two of my very best friends, my high school buddies, are MDs, and they're always saying, "Okay, Steve, what should we be taking?" Because of course, MDs
I do
are not
C
trained
because
in
of
nutrition.
you, and mega doses of C. You do more than I do, but I do 3 grams a day.
Yeah, that's not enough, but it's better than none.
It's a lot.
So here's an example, Leo. There is an enzyme, L-glulanolactone oxidase.
Yes, of course.
I know. We know the chromosome on the human genome, which codes for the creation of that enzyme. If that enzyme were being created, our livers would be synthesizing, based on our weight, around 20 grams of vitamin D a day. And and here's what the other weird thing is: all the other animals in the animal kingdom,
they make it.
Yes, except guinea pigs, some fruit bats, and a couple primates that we're very closely related to.
Yeah.
But the dogs and cats that people have as pets, all the animals in the zoo, everything is synthesizing their own vitamin C because it's so important. And the other thing is that our livers are trying to make it. The first 5 steps of the synthesis process, it's a 6-step process, they're all present and working. But the lack of that one enzyme causes it to fail. Wow. And if you inject that enzyme into someone, they suddenly start producing vitamin D until the enzyme ends up being destroyed over vitamin C.
Yeah, we're talking about C now. We talked about D. Now, so I have a liquid vitamin C that's 3 grams per capful, and I put in my beverage. But maybe I'll do a couple of those then.
It's absolutely.
You think I need 20 grams of vitamin C?
I take 10. I take 5 in the morning and 5 in the evening. Okay. It's water soluble, so it doesn't stay with you.
It just goes right. That's why I do it in this because it's titrated. So I'm sipping all day. So I'm kind of a constant flow of C because it goes right through you. It doesn't.
That is a good thing.
Yeah.
And I know there's lots of people who say, "Oh, supplements don't do anything. It's just a scam, and to take your money." It's like, okay, I get it. And as I said, I'll never have any proof that I wouldn't be in the same condition I am in if I hadn't been doing this.
We don't know if you'd be exactly as you are today, having never taken a supplement at all. There's no way of knowing that.
Right.
By the way, maybe, and they're suggesting this, you and I can get together. We do this little Friday off the cuff kind of broadcast where we could talk about the other things that you recommend if we had big disclaimers.
The problem is I would have to spend so much time researching it and getting back up to speed. I mean, I think the one of the things our listeners like about this podcast is that, it's
deeply researched.
I spend a lot of time putting it together and I may get around to it. I get around to doing something more.
The invitation's always here.
Thank you.
Just so you know, we have this Fridays. I do kind of oddball thing. I'm going to do coffee again. We did a coffee thing. It was a lot of fun. Cost me huge amounts of money on coffee equipment. Do you want to take a break?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Perfect.
And then we will go on and talk about cups. And I am still very interested in the recommendations for the best routers. That'll be
we're going to get there too.
Of great interest. But before we go much farther, it would be a good time to talk about our sponsor for this section of Security Now, ThreatLocker. That's a great name, isn't it? What does ThreatLocker do? It protects you with a zero trust solution that's easy to implement. If zero-day exploits and supply chain attacks keep you up at night, and lately, after listening to Security Now, I definitely have a hard time sleeping Tuesday nights. Worry no more. You can harden your security with ThreatLocker. And the companies that do really are happy about it. Companies like JetBlue, for instance, trusts ThreatLocker to secure its data to keep its business operations flying high. Unlike some other airlines might have been using a different solution that didn't work so well. Imagine, no names. Imagine taking a proactive, this is what's cool about Zero Trust, deny by default approach to cybersecurity. That means you're blocking every action, every process, every user, unless explicitly authorized by your team. That's what Zero Trust is all about. And ThreatLocker does it. It makes it so easy to do this. It provides a full audit of every action so you can go back and see for risk management and compliance purposes exactly what your permissions were. They have a very good 24/7 US-based support team. So they're there to support your onboarding and, of course, beyond. It really gives you the opportunity to stop the exploitation of applications, even trusted applications within your organization, and keep your business secure and protected from ransomware. I think the first time I heard about Zero Trust was Google, which has embraced this company-wide. This is a really good way to protect yourself. Organizations across any industry can benefit from ThreatLocker's ring fencing by isolating critical and trusted applications from unintended uses or weaponization, limiting attackers' lateral movement within the network. ThreatLocker's ring fencing works, and we know because it was able to foil a number of attacks that were not stopped by traditional EDR. I'll give you an example. The 2020, we talked about it several episodes on Security Now, the 2020 cyber attack on SolarWinds Orion, right? Companies that used ring fencing from ThreatLocker, the attack was foiled. By the way, ThreatLocker works for Macs too. Get unprecedented visibility and control of your cybersecurity quickly, easily, and cost-effective. ThreatLocker's zero-trust endpoint protection platform offers a unified approach to protecting users, devices, and networks against the exploitation of zero-day vulnerabilities. It really works. Get a free 30-day trial. You'll see how easy it is to implement and how powerful it is to protect you. You'll learn more about ThreatLocker, how you can use it to mitigate unknown threats, and by the way, to ensure compliance. Visit ThreatLocker.com. That's ThreatLocker.com. It does exactly what it says it does. ThreatLocker.com. Security starts and finishes at the endpoint, and zero trust is the way to do it. ThreatLocker.com. Okay. Now, Steve, on we go.
Shane Overturf, an IT consultant who listens to the podcast, said, Steve, you've already seen this article by Akamai regarding the CUPS vulnerability, but in case, he said you've probably already seen, but in case you haven't, I thought it would be of interest to you. And he gives me a link, and he said, while it's true that most people aren't going to be exposing port 631 to the internet, this is the CUPS vulnerability that we talked about last week, and I can't think of a valid reason to expose it. It's apparent that there are a fair number of those who do have it exposed. The Akamai article shows how trivial it is to leverage this vulnerability into a much more serious and widespread attack. He said something you alluded to in the last podcast. So for the devs to dismiss it as not so bad seems to be a dangerous attitude. Looking forward to Security Now, he says, boldly going where no man has gone before to 999 and beyond. So I'm glad that Shane brought this to my attention. Last week, I did note in passing that a handful of other security researchers had also examined the CUPS vulnerability, but I did not bother to dig into them. Akamai's findings are a bit chilling because they note that the presence of the CUPS browse service, which is the thing that listens on port 631, allows it to be used in amplifying reflection attacks. They gave their write-up the title, When CUPS Runneth Over, the Threat of DDoS. Akamai wrote, Akamai researchers have confirmed a new attack vector using CUPS that could be leveraged to stage distributed denial of service attacks. Research shows that to begin the attack, the attacking system only needs to send a single packet to a vulnerable and exposed CUPS service with internet connectivity. The Akamai Security Intelligence and Response Team, SIRT, found that more than 198,000 devices, so just shy of 200,000 devices, are vulnerable to this attack vector and are accessible on the public internet. Roughly one-third of those, 34% of those, could be used for DDoS abuse. They said 58,000 plus. Of the 58,000 plus vulnerable devices, hundreds exhibited an infinite loop of requests. The limited resources required to initiate a successful attack highlights the danger. It would take an attacker mere seconds to co-opt every vulnerable CUPS service currently exposed on the internet and cost the attacker less than a single US cent on modern hyperscale platforms. While reviewing the technical write-up about the vulnerabilities, we discovered that another attack vector was not discussed, DDoS. DDoS continues to be a viable attack vector used to harass and disrupt victims across the internet, from major industries and governments to small content creators, online shops, and gamers. Although the original analysis focused on the RCE, the remote code execution, which could have a more severe outcome, DDoS amplification is also easily abused in this case. The problem arises when an attacker sends a crafted packet specifying the address of a target as a printer to be added. For each single packet sent, the vulnerable cup server will generate a larger and partially attacker-controlled IPP HTTP request directed at the specified target. As a result, not only is the target affected, but the host of the cup server also becomes a victim as the attack consumes its network bandwidth and CPU resources. We should note that many of these identified machines were running, get this, on very old versions of cups, such as version 1.3, which was initially released in 2007. It is not uncommon for some organizations to leave machines running on extremely outdated hardware and software, and it is unlikely that such devices will be updated anytime soon. This presents a prime opportunity for malicious threat actors. They can take advantage of the outdated hardware for DDoS amplification or, given the RCE in this scenario, build botnets for many purposes, including DDoS. So, yes, as we say, vulnerabilities and exploits never get worse. They only ever get better. And to the issue of consumer routers, a listener who requested anonymity wrote, "Hello, Steve. I've been listening to your show for a few years, thanks to the recommendations of my former coworker. I am following more than I could at first and think I catch the general gist, but still miss significant bits of the technical know-how. Could you please recommend what is the most secure out-of-the-box residential router for non-technical folks, please? I want to replace my parents' router for multiple reasons. Primarily, since I can no longer access the online admin portal to update the firmware, which is HTTP, and concerns about TP-Link on the back end. I've heard suggestions such as use pfSense, but I've also heard that it would be easy to misconfigure something. I'm in a non-technical role, and I might be able to follow a YouTube video potentially, but I'm concerned about missing configurations. Would greatly appreciate it if you or the community could please recommend a budget-friendly residential router that is secure by default without needing end-user configuration. Thank you." And then she finished, "I'd appreciate not having my name mentioned on the show."
I think that's really a great question because you're a sophisticated user. You can run pfSense, and maybe many of our audience members are. But I think it's, for instance, people say, why don't you host your own password vault? And I'm not an expert on this. Bitwarden is. I let Bitwarden do it, and I think it's, even though it's not trust no one, it's safer to do that. If I wish I had your skills, but I don't. So it's appropriate, I think, for somebody to say, well, what's a safe, effective solution that doesn't require, a lot of tweaking and fiddling and knowledge?
Right. And that's exactly the case. And I liked this listener's question because I believe that today's mainstream consumer routers are all going to be secure by default.
Well, that's good news.
And after enabling automatic firmware updates that which today's routers have, that will keep themselves updated in the event of anything significant happening. Now, having said that, disabling UPnP and WPS, which are the two things that are generally enabled by default, that's a good idea too. But my point here is that consumers primarily get into trouble when they enable the additional extra fancy features that are being promoted to sell these routers today. Things like remote WAN side admin or any sort of internet accessible media, file, or other types of servers, a media server, a file server, or anything like that. we've seen over and over and over, there is no safe and secure way to do any of that. There are secure ways to accomplish those things, but they're more complex. They're more complex because more complexity is required to do those things securely. So in other words, don't do them at all unless you're going to do them the right way. Don't just flip a switch in your router to turn that stuff on. That's where you get into trouble. So, in this case, our listener's parents, who she's getting this router for, they don't need any of that crap. They need a NAT router. And, NAT is secure unless you do something to make it insecure. Unfortunately, UP&P can make it insecure, and WPS can make it insecure. They just need a generic SOHO, small office, home office, NAT router. I'm partial to ASUS, and I don't think I'd look any further than that, since something in ASUS's line would likely be a good match. I just looked at Amazon last night because I was curious. There's a nice looking ASUS Wi-Fi router for $66. So that's definitely budget friendly. And the ASUS firmware supports disabling WPS and UP&P. It offers isolated Wi-Fi guest networks so that you can put your guests and your IoT devices on a network isolated from the rest of the intranet. Also, a listener of ours, Michael Horowitz, maintains a terrific website over at routersecurity.org. All just one word, ROUTERSECURITE. I'm sorry, ITY, routersecurity.org. And I recommend Michael's site without reservation for any additional router security research someone want to do. He's
do his short list. I think this is exactly what I've recommended for years.
Yep.
I used to have a 5-step thing I did on the radio show. And this, before you use any wireless router, change the password, the administrative password, change the default SSID, turn on WPA2 encryption. As you said, turn off WPS and turn off UP&P, and you're pretty good right there. He has some other things to do, but like look for port forwarding and make sure that's not turned on. And of course,
but again, it won't be by default. So
right. Yep. And I do think that recommendation now that we make nowadays, which is turn on auto updates and make sure it's doing that, has become more and more important. Stacy Higginbotham, for a long time, our IoT expert, said, don't buy any IoT device that will not automatically wirelessly update, because you're going to need updates. There's no device that's perfect. And if you turn those updates, if it has the updates in the first place and you turn them on, that's pretty good. You agree?
Yep. I think that's right. And so I guess the main thing I wanted to say was that when we talked about that the ASUS 9.8 CVSS problem. Well, that was because somebody turned on one of those extra features. That's where you get into trouble. An out-of-the-box ASUS router is a strong NAT router. It's going to be fine.
And if you turn on automatic updates, you wouldn't have had that problem either, right? That would automatically fix it. The other thing I love about ASUS is they use their own customized version of DDWRT, which is an open source router firmware. You can put DDWRT on your ASUS router as well. And that's nice because open source means there are a lot of eyes looking at it, a lot of people working at it, and a lot of fixes out there. I agree with you on ASUS. We use Ubiquiti. We've always used Ubiquiti as a kind of a prosumer home system here. And
Michael likes Pep something. But it's like a $300 router, and it's he thinks it's more secure.
Synology makes excellent routers too, by the way.
Yes, Synology's got some nice routers too.
If you want to pay them, honestly, all the good routers, including ASUS now, are well over $200. $300 is not an unusual amount of money. It used to be you could buy a $59 Linksys router that route is pretty much shut down, as it should
Well,
be.
and the reason is they've generated, a lot of them are all these fancy gaming things, and they've got quality of
18
service
antennas.
and I just think there's a lot of stuff you're paying for that
You don't
most
need.
people don't need.
Yeah.
And I would say that our listeners' parents who just need something for their home, I'd spend $66 for that bottom of the barrel ASUS.
Does ASUS
There's
have a
nothing wrong with it.
$66 router? Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know. The other thing I would add, we often come across this on the Tech Guy, is that larger installations, bigger homes, mesh systems are often a good way to go. And Eero makes a very easy to use mesh system with excellent security as well. So if you do need more, sometimes a single ASUS in the middle of the house isn't enough to get to the corners.
And what do they call it? AI mesh. ASUS has a whole
They do have a
very
mesh
mature
system.
mesh
Yeah.
technology.
Yeah, actually, they wouldn't be bad either. I haven't tried them, but I'm sure it's good. ASUS is good. Yeah.
Okay, we're at our main topic, uBlock Origin and Manifest v3. Why don't we take our last break, and then we will do this unbroken.
Which was the name of Kevin Rose's, as you may remember, Kevin Rose's hacker podcast for a long time, The Unbroken. So The Unbroken returns in just a moment. But first, a word from our sponsor for this segment of Security Now, Flashpoint. There is it's really interesting. There is kind of a common thread running through most of our sponsors. They want you to be secure. And honestly, it's not a surprise. For security leaders, this has been a year like no other. All you had to do is listen to Security Now to realize that. Cyber threats, physical security concerns continue to increase. And now we've got geopolitical instability, wars adding a new layer of risk and uncertainty, plus a major presidential election coming up in a month. I mean, we're in crazy times. Let's just talk some numbers here. Last year, there was a staggering 84% rise in ransomware attacks. Let me say that again. Last year, ransomware went up 84%. That's almost double. A 34% jump in data breaches. And both of those could kill your company. Trillions of dollars in financial losses and threats to safety worldwide. So what is this Flashpoint? Well, Flashpoint empowers organizations to make mission-critical decisions that will keep their people and assets safe. Governments have this. It's called intelligence, right? Governments have intelligence agencies going out there, figuring out what's going on. Your company needs an intelligence source that will tell you what's going on by combining cutting-edge technology with the expertise of world-class analyst teams. And with Ignite, Flashpoint's award-winning threat intelligence platform, you get access to the critical data you need, finished intelligence, alerts even, analytics, all in one place. You can maximize your existing security investments by knowing ahead of time what you need to do. Some Flashpoint customers have avoided $500 million in fraud loss annually and have a 482% ROI in 6 months. Flashpoint is the intelligence you need to act intelligently. Flashpoint earned Frost & Sullivan's 2024 Global Product Leadership Award for unrivaled threat data and intelligence. One SVP of I can't tell you the name of the big financial institution in the U.S. He's the SVP of cyber operations, but this is a direct quote. Flashpoint saves us over $80 million in fraud losses every year. It pays for itself. Their proactive approach and sharp insights are crucial in keeping our financial institutions secure. They're not just a solution. They are a strategic partner helping us stay ahead of cyber threats. You need this information. You need this intelligence. It's no wonder Flashpoint is trusted not just by mission-critical businesses, but by governments worldwide. It's that good. So, find out more about the industry's best threat data and intelligence. Visit flashpoint.io today. Remember the name, Flashpoint. Go to the website, flashpoint.io. This is what you need to stay safe in the modern world. It's great you're listening to Security Now. I think we go a long way towards providing you the information you need, but your company needs even more, and that's why you go to flashpoint.io. We thank him so much for support. They're believers in Steve, believe me. They believe in what Steve's up to. And you support us, by the way, by going to that address and taking a look. Flashpoint.io. So this is a subject I've been very interested in for some time because Google's move towards Manifest v3 seems to be very self-serving and maybe enough for me to abandon using Chrome.
Well, we talked about it before, and it is the case that it's more secure, but it comes at the cost of neutering features of the add-ons that many of us have come to rely on.
A beneficent side effect, one might say.
So it's been several years since we talked about this, the web browser content blocker that's heavily favored by the internet's more tech-savvy users. It's what many of the listeners to this podcast and you and I, Leo, are using. I have it installed everywhere possible, and I've often commented when I see unfiltered websites that other people are using a browser. I can't imagine.
No.
I mean, stuff's jumping up and down, and things are popping up and sliding across the screen. And I cannot imagine not having uBlock Origin filtering the mess that the internet has become.
I mean, we're ad supported. I'm not against ads. Ads are vital to the ecosystem. But there's ads and then there's ads. And some of this is a security issue as well.
The little monkeys jumping up and down with the barbells. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, web browsers are gradually tightening the screws on the freedoms that add-on extensions such as uBlock Origin have traditionally enjoyed and upon which they depend. The Chrome browser's eventual shift from Manifest v2, version 2, to version 3 promises to make life much more difficult, if not impossible, for add-ons like uBlock Origin to continue to provide the features we've grown to depend upon. And there's been some recent interesting turbulence involving uBlock Origin, Mozilla, and uBlock Origin's cantankerous creator and developer and maintainer whose real world name is Raymond Hill. He goes by the moniker Gore Hill. And we'll get to the recent trouble between Mozilla and Gore Hill in a minute, where some 7 million installations of uBlock Origin are currently installed. But let's first look at what's going on with uBlock Origin and the future of the Chrome browser, which has around 37 million installations. The NeoWin site recently published a nice summary with the background titled uBlock Origin Developer recommends switching to uBlock Lite as Chrome flags the extension. So, NeoWin wrote, Google recently released Chrome 127 into the stable channel, and the update caused some commotion among certain customers. Those using the uBlock Origin extension, one of the most popular and well-received ad blockers, noticed that the browser now flags the extension with the following message. It says, uBlock Origin, this extension may soon no longer be supported. Remove or replace it with similar extensions from the Chrome Web Store. They wrote, makers of the uBlock Origin extension, meaning Gore Hill, published an article on GitHub that explained why Google Chrome claims uBlock Origin, quote, may soon no longer be supported, unquote. Long story short, they wrote, the message appears due to Google's plans to deprecate Manifest v2-based extensions in favor of Manifest v3. For those unfamiliar, they said, Manifest is a set of rules that defines how extensions integrate into browsers and interact with their web pages. Migration from Manifest v2 to v3 has been long in the making, It faced tremendous criticism from users and developers, forcing Google to delay its plans and implement various changes to address the complaints. Despite multiple changes, Manifest v3 still imposes significant limitations on browser extensions, especially content blockers. There is no Manifest v3 based uBlock origin. So the developer recommends uBlock Origin Lite, a pared down Manifest v3 compliant version of the extension. Like uBlock Origin, uBlock Origin Lite prioritizes reliability and efficiency, but it has to compromise some features that are now impossible under Manifest v3. There's a dedicated web page that describes the difference between uBlock Origin and uBlock Origin Lite. Since the switch to Manifest v3 cripples the extension quite a lot, the developer does not plan to implement an automatic upgrade in the Chrome Web Store. Basically, these are separate products, not, it doesn't make any sense for uBlock Origin, the full version, to upgrade to the Lite version. Gore Hill's not going to do that. Therefore, users can either stick to it until the bitter end, or they write, look for Manifest v3 compliant alternatives such as uBlock Origin Lite or others. Okay, so on this point, Gore Hill wrote, Manifest v2 uBlock Origin will not be automatically replaced by Manifest v3 uBlock Origin Lite. uBlock Origin Lite is too different from uBlock Origin for it to silently replace uBlock Origin. He said you will have to explicitly make a choice as to which extension should replace uBlock Origin according to your own prerogatives. Ultimately, whether uBlock Origin Lite is an acceptable alternative to uBlock Origin is up to you. It's not a choice that will be made for you. And we have to say that that's sort of a refreshing approach, right? After we saw
Kasparov.
Yes, thank you.
Not Kasparov, Kaspersky.
Kaspersky.
Or Kaspersky.
After we saw Kaspersky just automatically give people a replacement and surprise them thinking that their computers have been infected with malware.
Better. You like this.
That's right. So anyway, NeoWind's coverage finishes saying, according to the most recent announcement, Google plans to finish the migration to Manifest v3 by the end of this year, 2024. However, they said, enterprise customers will have the ability to continue using Manifest v2, the ones we want, extensions, for an additional 6 months. Interestingly, Mozilla, the only mainstream browser maker that does not use Chromium, I suppose that's true if you ignore Apple browsers, they wrote, does not plan to ditch Manifest v2 extensions. In other words, we can stay with what we want on Firefox. They said, therefore, uBlock Origin will continue working in Firefox and other browsers that do not deprecate v2 extensions. Okay, so although Chrome is reported to already be deprecating Manifest v2 in favor of v3, I just checked, and my Chrome is running the full uBlock Origin without any complaint. But that might not last long, since Google has said it will be finished with this migration 3 months from now. In Google's own Manifest v2 support timeline document, which I tracked down, they wrote, on June 3rd of this year, 2024, the Manifest v2 phase-out begins. They said starting on June 3rd, which was the date of this announcement, on the Chrome Beta, Dev, and Canary channels, if users still have Manifest v2 extensions installed, some will start to see a warning banner when visiting their extension management page. Okay, and everybody can do that now. Anybody with Chrome, go put up in the URL, put Chrome://extensions. That informs them that some Manifest v2 extensions they have installed will soon no longer be supported. At the same time, extensions with the featured badge that are still using Manifest v2 will lose their badge. So, reading that, I fired up my Chrome, which I don't normally have running any longer, and went over to Chrome://extensions. And sure enough, there it was. For uBlock Origin, it said this extension may soon no longer be supported. Remove or replace it with similar extensions. And then a link to the Chrome Web Store, and also down below where it specifically shows the uBlock Origin little red shield icon. There's a link to find alternative. Okay, I didn't do any of that, and I'll tell you why in a second. So, Google said this will be followed gradually in the coming months by the disabling of those extensions. Users will be directed to the Chrome Web Store where they will be recommended Manifest v3 alternatives for their disabled extension. For a short time after the extensions are disabled, users will still be able to turn their Manifest v2 extensions back on, but over time, that toggle will go away as well. So they're trying to softly force everyone off of v2 extensions, but eventually, like by turning them off, then you can go back and turn it on if you want to, then they'll turn it off again, so you can fight with Chrome that way for a while. And they said, like any big launches, all these changes will begin in pre-stable channel builds of Chrome first, Beta, Dev, and Canary. These changes will be rolled out over the coming months to Chrome stable with the goal of completing the transition by the beginning of next year, meaning 2025. And that timeline document ended with a statement. Enterprises using the Extension Manifest v2 availability policy will be exempt from any browser changes until June of 2025. Well, that I thought was interesting. What's this Extension Manifest v2 availability policy, and where can I get one? So I tracked that down. It applies to Windows, Mac, and Linux builds of Chrome, the desktop versions. Google's description for the policy, Google's, the maker of Chrome, their description of the policy is, quote, control if Manifest v2 extensions can be used by browser, which sounds like exactly what we want. So the details are, they said, under their description of this policy, Manifest v2 extension support will be deprecated and all extensions need to be migrated to v3 in the future. More information and the timeline of the migration can be found at blah, blah, blah. If the policy is set to default or not set, v2 extensions loaded are decided by browser following the timeline above. Not quite well written, but fine. If the policy is set to disable, that's setting number 1, v2 extension installations are blocked, existing ones are disabled. The option is going to be treated the same as if the policy is not set after v2 support is turned off by default, meaning you could do it now if for some reason you wanted to, or if your corporation did it to you or something. If the policy is set to enable, that's setting 2, v2 extensions are allowed. The option is going to be treated the same as if the policy is not set before v2 support is turned off by default. In other words, you get to keep them. Then they said extensions availability are still controlled by other policies. So we have 0 is the default, 1 is their disabled, 2 is their enabled, and 3 is that they're enabled for forced extensions only. Chrome's forced extensions, as a reminder, are those that are installed by enterprise policy. They're installed silently without user interaction, bypassing the normal installation process, and they're not removable by users. So, setting this to 2 sounds like exactly what we want. That gives any savvy Chrome user an additional 6 months of access to their current V2 extensions, not just uBlock Origin, but anything else that you might want, which is sensitive to this V2, V3 switchover. For Windows systems, this policy can be applied by adding a 32-bit DWORD value to the Windows registry. It can be done by hand or by executing a .reg registry file. And, this is coming, right? To make this as easy and foolproof as possible for our listeners, I've created a GRC shortcut, which will allow you to instantly obtain a 3-line, it's very simple, registry file from me. So the shortcut is grc.sc/v2. grc.sc/v2. That will offer your browser a file to download named v2extension.reg. You can open it in a text editor to verify its contents, or to get, if you want to do it by hand, which you're certainly welcome to get the exact spelling of everything, because that's got to be exactly right. Either way, you can double-click on the file to execute it. Since the file has come to you from the internet, it will carry the mark of the web, which will cause Windows to scrutinize it further. And since reg files are just text files, I cannot digitally sign that. So I was unable to give it GRC's blessing. So Windows will inform you that the source of the file cannot be verified and ask if you're sure. Once you say, yeah, it's okay, I know that guy, you'll get another pop-up, this time from the registry editor, explaining that running .reg files can mess things up and that you should only proceed if you know and trust the source of the file and you're sure you want to continue. If you click yes, your system will have added a policy to Chrome instructing it to continue allowing manifest v2 extensions to run without harassment until next summer. A cool thing you can do either before or after, actually it'd be fun to do it both, is there's a different URL you can put into Chrome, chrome://policy. That will show you any policies that are set in Chrome. I didn't have any before. After I ran this registry tweak, sure enough, there it displayed the policy that was in place. And when I went back to Chrome:/extensions, that warning message about uBlock Origin was gone. So Chrome was no longer nervous about me running a V2 extension, and now I get to keep uBlock Origin for Chrome. Not that I use Chrome very much, but sometimes I do. I get to keep it all until June of 2025. Yep, and there that is. The are you sure you want to do it?
Good. So now I'm safe on Windows.
Yep.
Not so much anywhere else, but
no. The same policy is available on Mac and Linux. They call it a preference, and I didn't track down how to set a Chrome browser preference, but it is available on all of the desktop platforms.
Good to know. Thank you, Steve. That's great.
Okay, so this brings us back to the question: what features does V2 compatible uBlock Origin sacrifice in the transition to V3 compatible uBlock Origin Lite? Because after June of 2025, Chrome and all Chromium-based browsers.
Well, that's the question. Do they all have to do it? Like, does Brave have to do it? Does Arc have to do it? I mean, these are all
Edge? It looks like Edge is going to be terminating V2 support. Brave, I have learned from one of our listeners, appears to be willing to go to some effort to continue with V2 support. So I think we'll be a little bit on pins and needles. Well, maybe. I mean, it is pretty core to the Chromium architecture. It may be that they're not going to rip out V2. They're just going to, like in Chrome, they'll shut it down, but leave it there. So Brave may be able to turn it back on. It's just, we don't know at this point. Okay, so the questions are, what's happening? The uBlock Origin Lite GitHub repository has an FAQ page which answers this question in some detail, and actually with lots of technical jargon. Wikipedia actually offers a more accessible summary. So here's what Wikipedia says. They said in 2023, Google made changes known as Manifest v3 to the Web Request API used by ad blocking and privacy extensions to block and modify network connections. Following Google's implementation of Manifest v3 and the end of support for v2, uBlock Origin's effectiveness is drastically reduced in Google Chrome and other Chromium-based browsers. Okay, and I'll just interject, while this sounds bad and this is not any failing in uBlock Origin. It's true universally for all content control add-ons under MV3. This is why Google has been met with significant pushback and why, for example, the EFF is apoplectic. Anyway, Wikimedia elaborates. They wrote, as a result, uBlock Origin Lite was created and designed to comply with Manifest v3 extension framework. uBlock Origin Lite differs significantly from uBlock Origin in several key aspects, primarily due to the constraints and design goals associated with MV3. Specifically, it lacks filter list updates outside of extension updates and has no custom filters, strict blocked pages per site switches or dynamic filtering. Non-Chromium browsers, they wrote, such as Firefox, are unaffected. Google has been criticized for implementing some of these features due to its dominance in the online advertising market. Gore Hill's FAQ page for uBlock Origin Lite asks and answers this question. Question: if I install uBlock Origin Lite, will I see a difference from uBlock Origin? And his answer, maybe, maybe not. Depends on websites you visit, how you configured uBlock Origin, and how you configured uBlock Origin Lite. And he says, in short, only you can tell. He says it's very possible that the sites you visit do not require any of the filtering capabilities specific to uBlock Origin, in which case you won't see a difference. Also, mind that by default, there's no cosmetic filtering or scriptlet injection in uBlock Origin Lite, while these occur by default in uBlock Origin. In uBlock Origin Lite, you will have to raise the blocking mode to either optimal or complete to benefit from cosmetic filtering and scriptlet injection. Furthermore, uBlock Origin Lite requires the default mode to be optimal or complete for some advanced filtering capabilities to take effect, while they're enabled by default in uBlock Origin. In general, uBlock Origin Lite will be less effective at dealing with websites using anti-content blocking or minimizing website breakage. Okay, so it doesn't sound like the end of the world for uBlock Origin Lite on Chrome, which Chrome users will at least be able to delay using this policy change until June of 2025. So that's the story with Chrome and all the closely related Chromium-based web browsers. The great news for the 7 million of us who are currently using the full uBlock Origin on Firefox is that Mozilla has officially stated that they have no plans to remove support for Manifest v2 from
right.
Firefox.
That's
and
great.
Leo, as you said, that's gonna put some pressure, I think, on people who really do care about controlling their internet browsing experience.
They should have been using Firefox all along anyway, in my opinion.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
So the good news is Mozilla has no plans to do the same for Firefox. Okay. However, uBlock Origin is so popular and well known that a recent kerfuffle between Mozilla and Gore Hill regarding uBlock Origin Lite received a great deal of attention online. There's a bunch of tech of coverage of it in the tech press. A bunch of our listeners said, "Hey, what's this about? Can you figure this out?" Okay, you may be thinking, did I say Mozilla and uBlock Origin Lite?
Yeah.
And if so, why is there a Lite edition of uBlock Origin on Firefox when Mozilla has said that Firefox's support for Manifest v2 is safe and will never be removed? The reason is that Gore Hill just wanted to release the same add-on feature set for Firefox and Manifest v3 that he had created for Chrome. He wanted to have a uBlock Origin Lite available for both major web browser platforms. A little over a month ago, Gore Hill posted to GitHub that he had received 2 emails from Mozilla add-ons, addons.mozilla.org, also known as AMO, the abbreviation of that domain, addons.mozilla.org. So, and he posted the entire content of the emails that he'd received. Mozilla Add-ons wrote, "Hello, your extension, uBlock Origin Lite, was manually reviewed by the Mozilla Add-ons team in an assessment performed on our own initiative of content that was submitted to Mozilla Add-ons. Our review found that your content violates the following Mozilla policy or policies. First, consent. Specifically, non-existent. For add-ons that collect or transmit user data, the user must be informed and provided with a clear and easy way to control this data collection. The control mechanism must be shown at first run of the add-on. The control should contain a choice accompanied by the data collection summary. Depending on the type of data being collected, the choice to send cannot be enabled by default. If data collection starts or changes in an add-on update, or the consent and control is introduced in an update, it must be reshown to all new and upgrading users for the exact requirements referred to," and then they have a URL for an example of how to provide a consent or control dialog. See, and another URL. Also, if your add-on is listed on addons.mozilla.org, the listing needs to include a privacy policy, and a summary of the data collection should be mentioned in the add-on description.
You can't blame Mozilla for saying that, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But Gore Hill probably doesn't want to do that.
Well, yes. And so, point number 2.
Yeah.
They wrote, sources. Specifically, sources or instructions are missing. They wrote, your add-on contains minified, concatenated, or otherwise machine-generated code. You need to provide the original sources together with instructions on how to generate the exact same code used in the add-on. Source code must be provided as an archive and uploaded, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and this refers to a bazillion affected versions. He's got like, I can't even count, like, I don't know, like a huge number of affected versions.
Well, that's reasonable too, because if there's hidden code in there.
Completely reasonable. So the second email listed exactly the same add-on policy failures, none of which applied to uBlock Origin Lite or uBlock Origin for that effect, but that one only showed the oldest of the versions and gave him 14 days to cure the problem. The other ones immediately yanked all of those previous ones, including the most recent one, from the add-ons site, the Mozilla add-ons. Gorhill predictably wrote in the thread, he said, contrary to what these emails suggest, the source code files highlighted in the email have nothing to do with data collection. There is no such thing anywhere in uBlock Origin Lite. There is no minified code in uBlock Origin Lite, and certainly none in the supposed faulty files. There is a privacy policy link in uBlock Origin Lite's add-on page, meaning these manually reviewed emails were 100% bogus. No, like whoever did this couldn't have actually looked at what was being supplied. They probably assume that every add-on now is doing data collection. And so when they saw that this thing didn't pop up a data collection notification, they said, it's missing. Well,
but Gorhill doesn't collect any data?
None whatsoever.
Okay.
Zero.
Well, then, all right.
That's not what uBlock Origin does, right? I mean, he's old school. He's one of us.
But could it be said you're collecting data if, I wonder if some of the activities of an ad blocker kind of imply that maybe you have to look at this. For instance, you might have to look at the site somebody's visiting to know what extension to enable. Or it may be that, in fact, the extension sees the sites that you're visiting, in which case there is a theoretical possibility of data collection, right?
Well, that's why he provides the source. Now, and we've talked about this, Firefox requires that you provide the full source, no minification, and instructions on how to build it from scratch. So that it's
good.
Like, yeah, I mean, they've done everything right. Unfortunately, they've accused Gorhill of using minified code, no ability to build it, and data collection, none of which is true.
So he doesn't do any of that?
Doesn't do any of that.
He doesn't minify code?
No.
Oh, so this was some automated thing that didn't know what the hell it was talking about.
It was completely bogus. It was completely bogus. And the problem is you don't give bogus
not to Gorhill.
To Gorhill.
No.
So he responds, I don't have the time or motivation to spend time on this nonsense. So I will let AMO do whatever they want with uBlock Origin Lite.
Lord.
I will probably publish a self-hosted version which auto-updates, like how dev build of uBlock Origin is self-hosted, when I find the time to arrange all that. Okay, so that was his first posting. The following day, on September 5th, someone with the handle Rob W posted in this discussion thread over on GitHub. He said, @Gorhill, the review decision looks inaccurate to me. Could you reply to the email to let the original reviewers know that the assessment is inaccurate? What you wrote above in the comment is sufficient. Gorhill did not reply to that in the thread. But nearly 2 weeks later...
I don't know who Raymond Hill is. I see him as something like Ted Kaczynski in a shack somewhere with a really long beard.
Like I said, if Dvorak wrote code...
this would be it.
What are you talking about?
And God bless him, and we are very grateful. And, I don't blame him for not wanting to engage in bureaucratic back and forth.
That's just exactly it. Yeah. So 2 weeks go by, and on September 18th, Gorhill posted, starting with uBlock Origin Lite, and it was 2024.9.12.1004. The Firefox version of the extension will be self-hosted and can be installed from the release section. The extension will auto-update when a newer version is available. And then, on September 26th, Gorhill posted that he had changed his mind. He wrote, "The Firefox version of uBlock Origin Lite will cease to exist. I'm dropping support because of the added burden of dealing with AMO's nonsensical and hostile review process. However trivial this may look to an outsider, it's a burden I don't want to take on, since the burden is on me. I make the decision whether I can take it on or not. It's not something up for discussion." He said the burden is that even as a self-hosted extension, it fails to pass review at submission time, which leads to it having to wait an arbitrary amount of time, where time is an important factor when all the filtering rules must be packaged into the extension. And once I finally receive a notification that the review cleared, I have to manually download the extension's file, rename it, then upload it to GitHub, then manually patch the update URL to point to the new version. It took 5 days after I submitted version 2004.9.12.1004 to finally be notified that the version was approved for self-hosting. As of writing, version 2004.9.22.986 has still not been approved. However often I look at all this, every time I can only conclude the feedback from Mozilla add-ons team to have been nonsensical and hostile. And as a matter of principle, I won't partake in this nonsensical and hostile review process.
I can't say I blame him.
It only takes a few seconds to see how this is nonsensical. Keep in mind that this, quote, was manually reviewed by the Mozilla add-ons team, unquote. And then he says, quote, he quotes them, "For add-ons that collect or transmit user data, the user must be informed and provided with a clear and easy way to control this data collection." And then he says, "Where is the data collection in this file?" And he provides the URL to the JavaScript of his code. Then he quotes them again. "Your add-on contains minified, concatenated, or otherwise machine-generated code." And then he says again, "Where is the minification in these files?" And then he gives us 4 URLs to the open source JavaScript of his code. Then he quotes them again. "Also, if your add-on is listed on addons.mozilla.org, the listing needs to include a privacy policy, and a summary of the data collection should be mentioned in the add-on description." And he said, "Right. It's always been there since the first version published on AMO more than a year ago." And then he gives us the URL. And he said, "Incidentally, all the files reported as having issues are exactly the same files being used in uBlock Origin for years, and have been used in uBlock Origin Lite as well for over a year with no modification. Given this, it's worrisome. What could happen to uBlock Origin in the future, given it uses the exact same files?" He says steps taken by Mozilla add-ons team as a result of the nonsensical issues was to disable all versions of uBlock Origin Lite except for the oldest version, first published by AMO on August of 2023. That oldest version is also reported as having the same issues and was set to be disabled by Mozilla add-ons team unless the issues were addressed. He said, based on that finding, those versions of your extension will be disabled in 14 days. So he wrote, "I disabled this version myself to prevent new users from ending up with a severely outdated version of the extension to avoid a subpar first experience of uBlock Origin Lite." So essentially, he says it was deemed that all versions of uBlock Origin Lite were having issues, But instead of disabling all of them except the most recent one, they disabled all of them except the oldest one. This is hostile, considering that whoever installed uBlock Origin Lite at that point would be installing a version of uBlock Origin Lite with severely outdated filter lists, along with an outdated code base. He said many issues were fixed in the code base since August 2023. I'm unable to attribute good faith to both the nonsensical review feedback and the steps taken as a result of this nonsensical review feedback, and I am unable to take on the added burden of having to deal with nonsense. This is unfortunate because despite uBlock Origin Lite being more limited than uBlock Origin, there were people who preferred the light approach of uBlock Origin Lite, which was designed from the ground up to be an efficient, suspendable extension, thus a good match for Firefox on Android. From this point on, there will no longer be a package published in the release section for Firefox except for the release one, uBlock Origin Lite 2024 922 986, if and when it's approved. So then Raymond apparently received some additional non-sympathetic feedback.
Oh boy.
About his about his decision to
Don't poke the
completely
bear.
drop uBlock Origin Lite from Firefox, since he finally posted on October 1st, last Tuesday. Looks like the sentence, however trivial this may look to an outsider, it's a burden I don't want to take on, is lost on many who want to have an opinion about all of this. I dropped support for uMatrix years ago because it had become a burden I could not take on. This is such a case here, where the unwarranted delisting of uBlock Origin Lite and the requirement of having to deal with this caused the support to maintain a Firefox version to cross the line into the burden I cannot take on territory. Amount of burden to take on is a personal decision, not something to be decided by others. And to add just a bit of objectivity, since Gorhill has clearly taken a stand on this, here's a sympathetic comment I found 6 days ago over on Y Combinator, where somebody completely different said, I manage a medium-size browser extension at work. We also offered it on Firefox, but I have spent the past year struggling to get back into Mozilla Store after a manual review. As far as I can tell, there are maybe 2 reviewers that are based in Europe. Romania? The turnaround time is long when I am in the US, and it has been rife with this same kind of simple mistake that takes 2 weeks to resolve. He says, you need a privacy policy. We already have one. You're using machine-generated code and minified code. No, you're looking at the built code, not the included source. We cannot reproduce your source. Right. That's because you didn't follow the instructions and are in the wrong directory.
Oh boy.
He says, very frustrating. And there were a number of other similar comments. So it appears that Mozilla really does currently have a problem with this aspect of their bureaucracy, and that Gorhill, someone who has, shall we say, an extremely low threshold of tolerance for any sort of incompetence that's impeding him, finally just decided that it wasn't worth his time or energy to fight a frustrating battle.
He doesn't take fools lightly, and God bless him.
Exactly.
You know what? I don't blame him, and God, I'm so grateful that he writes this and gives it away for free. It must be a significant amount of work.
Yep.
And I don't blame him for saying it's just not worth additional effort.
No.
Yeah.
So we have the full story. Under Chrome, we get an extra 6 months of the use of full uBlock Origin with the addition of that little policy tweak in Windows, and something equivalent is available on Macs and Linux. Again, grc.sc/v2 will deliver the reg file to a Windows user, double click on it, say yes a couple times, and you're all set up. I'll finish today's discussion with something you mentioned, Leo, at the top, which is, we've got an evolving technology in our browser add-on ecosystem. We have not talked about this large and significant question of the ethics surrounding editing received web pages to remove content, any content, that the website wishes to deliver and push on its visitors.
That's a very good point.
Tracking scripts are one thing, but the more controversial removal is that which produces revenue for the site. We know that today there are many websites that wholly depend upon the revenue from advertising to survive, and we need look no further than this podcast's own hosting network, TWiT, to see firsthand the effects of advertising revenue becoming less available than it once was.
Right.
So I will finish today's discussion by quoting the author of uBlock Origin. Raymond Gorhill, says the following on his GitHub page for his original full-spectrum content blocker, uBlock Origin. He writes, uBlock Origin is a CPU and memory-efficient, wide-spectrum content blocker for Chromium and Firefox. It blocks ads, trackers, coin miners, pop-ups, annoying anti-blockers, malware sites, etc. By default, using EasyList, Easy Privacy, Peter Lowe's block list, online malicious URL block list, and UBO filter lists. There are many other lists available to block even more. Hosts files are also supported. uBlock Origin uses the EasyList filter syntax and extends the syntax to work with custom rules and filters. You may easily unselect any pre-selected filter lists if you think uBlock Origin blocks too much. For reference, AdBlock Plus installs with only EasyList, AdBlock Plus filters, and acceptable ads enabled by default. It is important to note that using a blocker is not, he has in all caps, theft. Do not fall for this creepy idea. The ultimate logical consequence of blocking equals theft is the criminalization of the inalienable right to privacy. Ads, unintrusive or not, are just the visible portion of the privacy-invading means entering your browser when you visit most sites. uBlock Origin's primary goal is to help users neutralize these privacy-invading methods in a way that welcomes those users who do not wish to use more technical means. So, we've spent a lot of time through the 19 plus years of this podcast as this industry has evolved looking at this issue. If advertisements were visually static and non-intrusive, if they were not planting cookies in my browser and running code in an active attempt to fingerprint me for the purpose of tracking my movements and compiling a list of everywhere I go and everything I do, and if the websites hosting these obnoxious privacy invasions were not actively complicit in this, then I would feel far more sympathetic to the need for websites to generate revenue by forcibly exposing me to things I do not want.
And we should point out that there are many websites, Jason Snell's website is a good example, that have first-party ads that are plain text that are not blocked by uBlock Origin or any other ad blocker.
Yep.
They can't because they're first-party. It's part of the content. And so it is possible to have advertising that goes right through any ad blocker because it's not invasive. It doesn't invade your privacy.
And I do not believe that where we are today in the year 2024 is where we'll be 10 years from now. If nothing else, we can see how the industry and government are struggling to come to an agreement and compromise. I was disappointed that European regulators forced Google to abandon its significantly privacy-enforcing privacy sandbox technology. The fact that they were forced to give it up because it would have been so privacy enforcing tells you all you need to know about the state of today's web technology.
We talked about that on MacBreak Weekly today, that you can't assume governments are going to always act in your favor and in favor of protecting your privacy. In fact, they may be acting in favor of advertisers' right to invade your privacy, as in this case. Yeah.
Yes. And we know content control add-ons do not completely prevent tracking and profiling, but they do mitigate it. And they do make the use of the web significantly more pleasant. One thing seems clear. If individual end users, the consumers of the ads and the targets of this tracking, do not push back within their means against this abuse of our attention and privacy, it's likely to take much longer for it to change. So we're voting by saying, no, thank you, fix your technology and, we won't have a problem.
Cory Doctorow has called the widespread use of ad blockers the largest consumer boycott in history. Almost 50% of people who use the internet now use ad blocking technology. And that's a pretty strong vote against. Now, some people don't like ads, period. I mean, there are really people who will just say, I'm not going to listen to an ad. I'm not going to look at an ad. I will block every ad. I don't care what your monetization strategy is. And so I think there is a percentage of people who just don't like ads.
Well, and websites have the option of sensing that somebody is refusing to look at ads and then refusing to show them content.
Yeah, that's true. Don't ad blockers try to get around that stuff? No.
Yeah. Again, the controversial thing is that we're editing what our browser is doing.
Yeah, right.
And you argue, hey, why do I not have the right to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it is
to decide what I want my browser to do on my computer.
Yeah, it's your screen, your computer.
Yep.
Right. This is a really difficult one, and I do have to point out that a lot of websites have gone out of business this year, including Anand-Tech, iMore, because there was no way to get around this consumer boycott. There's no way to make a living. We're faced with that as well. Now, I understand people don't like ads. I don't know what the answer is to this. Our ads are not, they may be intrusive. I don't think they're non-intrusive, but they do not spy on you. And they're not malware in any form. They are just audio. But a lot of people fast forward through them. There's no real way to block them, but they might fast forward through them. I don't know what the answer is, Steve. I really don't. This is a tough one, because we want journalism, right?
And part of the problem is, ads really are obnoxious. They have discovered that if you turn the volume up, then your dollar amount goes up. So the moment you see that, everyone's going to turn the volume up, and then they're competing with each other to see who has the most volume. And a lot of them are really obnoxious.
I agree.
I can't watch television without being able to fast forward past the ads.
But Steve, do you want everything to have a paywall? Because that's the option
too.
That's really the option, is that you can't read it unless you pay for it.
So I would have no problem paying for something that I use routinely. That is, for example, the Washington Post, the New York Times, or, some site, but I'm not a person who is consuming a great deal of focused online content. I'm not reading the New York Times or the Washington Post or any online content in a go back and like to it constantly. I'm annoyed that my iPhone keeps offering me news that I can't read, because when I click on it, I have to be Apple Plus or Apple News Plus. It's like, don't show this to me if I can't read it.
So there's the large issue. You live in a small town. I live in a small town. The New York Times and the Washington Post are not going to cover our city council meetings, our school board meetings, the initiatives we're voting on in a couple of weeks, because it's not national news. And yet we don't have local newspapers in anymore because there's no money, there's no support, no financial support.
Yeah.
So that means we've got an electorate that is fundamentally, unless they really go out and look, ill-informed on the issues of the day. That's a problem too. So this is a very thorny issue. I do want to be clear though. I'm grateful to Raymond Hill for uBlock Origin. I use it on every darn computer. I'm not happy that Google is making it useless on Chrome. I hope that Firefox continues to support it. And I understand that there is definitely a contradiction in my use of an ad blocker and making my living through an ad-supported network. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, there was some story I was pursuing for this podcast, I went to the site and I saw it briefly, and then it brought up a big blacked out region and offered me to either subscribe or not. And I thought, well, I'd like to get to be able to see if this is something I want to pursue. But I've never been to this site before. I'll probably never be to it again. So I'm not going to subscribe. Anyway, I went up to uBlock Origin. I disabled scripting on the site, refreshed it.
And you saw it.
And the site was there because they were using scripting in order to present this page blackout. And I'm sorry, but I don't have to run script if I don't want to, thanks to uBlock Origin, making it that simple.
Right.
So... I appreciate having that control, and I heard that Firefox is going to be getting vertical tabs soon, and so I won't have to have an add-on in order to do that. I'll be a very happy one-stop.
Okay, but don't yell at us if we go club only, everything behind a paywall, because if we have to do that to survive, we might have to, right? And I know that would make me unhappy. It would make you unhappy. We want everybody to be able to hear this. And thank goodness we have people in the club who support what we're doing. We have advertisers support what we're doing so that we can offer this for free to anybody who wants to listen you don't have to run an ad blocker. There's nothing's putting a big X across the screen.
Well, club only would mean no more ads, so that would be good.
Yeah, well, you have that option right now. $7 a month, no more ads. You can do that right now. Well, it was my original plan. I think you remember when we started TWiT. I didn't want ads.
We didn't have ads.
We didn't have them. But even when I was, offered ads, we said, no, we want to be listener supported. But the most we ever got was $9,000 a month, which would have supported one show. And we wanted to do more than that. This show wouldn't exist. And I think this show has done some really important stuff over its... What is it, 990?
Listeners think so. Thank you very much for the feedback, everybody. I appreciate it.
Yeah. We're really glad we can keep doing this show, and we thank you for your support and listening to the ads, and if you can, patronizing the advertisers. 4 more to go before $9.99.
I'm going to have to spend a little time on some technology to handle 4 digits.
You're so funny. Well, TWiT's now in 4 digits, and we were. I actually, when we started it, I think I made room for 5, which was very optimistic. I don't think we're going to get to episode 99,999, but who knows?
There'll be nothing left of us.
We'll worry about it then. Steve Gibson is at grc.com. That's his website. That's where you could find SpinRite, the world's best mass storage maintenance, performance enhancer, recovery utility. If you have mass storage, you need SpinRite. Steve's bread and butter, by the way. That's how he makes a living. So if you don't yet have version 6.1, go on and get it. It's free to people who already bought SpinRite. And if you haven't, buy a copy. It's well worth it. Everybody should have SpinRite. You can also get a copy of the show at Steve's site, grc.com. He has 2 unique formats, the 16 kilobit audio version and transcripts, which are really nice if you want to read along. He also has the show notes there. You can always download them after the fact. And the 64 kilobit audio version of the show. Website twit.tv has both the 64 kilobit audio and video. Ooh, you want to see Steve's smiling face? We offer that for free. Just go to twit.tv/SN. There's a YouTube channel that's got all the shows, all the video shows anyway. It doesn't have that vitamin D episode because that was audio only. I don't think it does. I think it only has the video shows. If you want to see that, you can go to twit.tv/SN, and there's a link to the YouTube channel. There's also a link to a couple of podcast clients, but you can use any podcast client to subscribe and get the version, audio or video, that you prefer the minute it's available, since Benito polishes it up, so to speak. Benito Gonzalez, our technical director and editor. Thank you, Benito, for the work you do to make this available. He's the behind-the-scenes guy. And we do thank our club members. If you're not yet a member of Club Twit, $7 a month, ad-free versions of all the shows, lots of extra content. That coffee episode, if we can ever get Steve to do a vitamin episode, that'll be in the club too. Twit.tv/clubtwit for more. Steve, you should sell those giant coffee cups on the website. There would be a market for that thing. Is huge. If you want to know how you get a quadruple venti latte in a single mug.
Yeah, Quinty.
Quinty. 15 shots? No,
5.
5. Okay. Thanks, Steve. Have a great week. I'll let you know who Satoshi Nakamoto is next week.
Righto. Cool. Bye.
Security now.